Hi, everybody. I'm Norm Byers with Genesis Church. The world is upside down, and it's humbling, it's difficult, and it's uncomfortable. And today we want to talk about how to lead yourself when the wheels are coming off. And I've got three of my bros with us here today, three men on this panel. John Terry, Eugene Wong, and Jeremy Montai. These guys collectively, they lead our men's group called Man Up. Guys, there's a global health crisis, which has led, as you all know, to an economic crisis. Many of us are dealing with all the pressures that come with that, not away at work, where we can kind of leave it there, but at home with our families. And what we want to kind of wrestle with today is how can we lead ourselves in these times? How can we lead ourselves through these challenges? So thank you, each of you, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Norm.
You betcha. A guy named John Maxwell, he's kind of a leadership guru. He said, learning to lead yourself is one of the most important things you will ever do. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is in that vein. And so, Jeremy, I wanted to start with you. And Jeremy, I just appreciate your transparency about the things you're wrestling with, and anxiety is a big one that everybody's grappling with on one level or another because of the uncertainty of what is going to happen in the future. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on how a man of God is to deal with the uncertainty and anxiety, those anxieties, feelings that we may have?
Sure. Well, certainly anxiety is something that I struggle with. Control, if you, with the last Man Up, I actually shared about just struggling with anxiety and what God was teaching me. Certainly this has given me an opportunity to practice what I preach, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a challenge, and I definitely have been dealing with a lot of anxiety these last, few weeks. I'm kind of a news junkie. I read the news all the time, and I'm a hypochondriac. So this has been a particularly difficult situation, but I am the original
combination.
I'm the original social distancer. I'm not a big
That's true.
hugger. Yeah. So,
Trendsetter.
Yeah. Social distancing before it was cool. So, no, anxiety is real, man. And it's been hard. And, so I've, been praying about that and seeking the Lord and just asking him for peace. It's interesting. The beginning of the year, I made a list of things to pray about, and my top wanted in 2020 to grow in trusting God more and to worry less. And so, certainly this has given me an opportunity to dig into that, and it's been hard, but what's a man of God to do? Just a couple of things that I've been, working on. A big one is when this first kind of got going, I just found myself reading the news, 8 hours a day, on and all day long at work and at home and on weekends and Sundays and everything. And it's depressing, and I mean, it's real. This is real stuff. I mean, it's right in our own state, and our backyard really. And just constantly filling my mind with, what seems to be a pretty hopeless situation. And I kind of dawned on me that I need to just consciously, put some of that media down and replace it with, more prayer, more time in the Word. And then another thing that really helps me is listening to sermons. I've been listening to some John Piper sermons, Matt Chandler, reading a little bit of the stuff Tim Keller's been saying. Need to listen to some of his talks, but and just the messages of this idea that God has a plan, that's just throughout Scripture. God is sovereign. And I'll, you asked me a month ago, is God sovereign? Heck yeah, but do I believe it? I'm one of these guys that, I say I trust in God, but I also have always had a plan B. I've been real fortunate in life. I've, for whatever reason, been healthy. I've always had, adequate finances and really not a lot to, I've worried and I haven't had anything to worry about, put it that way, So, it's been hard, minimize that. And I think what I've been trying to do is really consciously reduce the amount of, time I spend on, consuming media, whether that's the news or social media or just that kind of stuff, and then increasing the amount of time I'm spending, with sort of kind of godly inputs, less, less hopeless information, more information that,
Yeah.
points me to putting my hope in the Lord,
So you were saying that one of the things that's been helping you is just realizing God is at work. Has there been any kind of scripture or anything that sort of fed into that belief for your heart in this time?
Yeah, I've been meditating for whatever reason. I just kind of been going through the book of John for a while. And when this whole coronavirus thing really ramped up, a couple weeks ago, I just happened to be in John 17, which is, it's called the high priestly prayer. And it's what Jesus prays over his disciples. And then also he says for the people who are going to believe in the future, he prays a prayer. It's Jesus asking God, it's what Jesus is request to God for his followers is. And I've just been reading it over and over and trying to think about it and understand it. And one particular verse I'll read, this is right before Jesus gets arrested. He prays to God over his disciples and followers. He says, I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. So Jesus' prayer is that he's saying, I'm not asking that you remove them, from difficulty, basically, but it's that you protect them from the evil one. So as much as I, worry about stuff, I think the goal for this thing is that, for myself personally, for my family, for the church, is that, we come out of this thing, whatever that looks like, with a faith and a trust that's deeper than it was, going into it. And that, we don't lose faith, but that, this isn't something, another scripture, it's along that vein, is what Satan meant for evil, God meant for good. What good is going to come out of this? I don't know, but I do know God is at work. God does have a plan. He was in control a month ago when this didn't seem like anything, and he's in control today,
face the brutal facts. I mean, it's
Right.
kind of one of those things. It's like, we're probably not getting taken out of this like a miracle. We're going to have to work through it. And so, there's anxiety with that. But what I've heard you say, and that's really encouraging, is that just to remind ourselves, God is sovereign. He is on the throne. He's at work. He's working on us. And so I want to move to John. And, John, anxiety is one kind of big issue that a lot of us are wrestling with, but there's other issues that guys tend to, wrestle with in terms of when we're dealing with stuff that's out of our control. What are some, you have any thoughts on that, other unhealthy things, or just the way that guys deal with things and how they're feeling in this time?
That's a great question. And anxiety's, a big one. I think I've struggled with anxiety my whole adult life. I think it's because of a mixture of, insecurities and pride and wanting to be in control. I've been on, I thought this would be, I've been on like anti-anxiety meds for about 20 years. And in January, I decided this would be the year that I'd reduce them, because 2020, it's a good even number. What could go wrong? That was a horrible decision. This was not the right time to do that. But I think anxiety is huge. There's a lot of feelings that I think are normal in a crisis. There's a lot of sadness, a lot of heartbreak going on. People I talk to, just because of canceled people, canceling weddings, canceling big events, just a lot of cancellation. There's a lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of confusion and anger. So I think there's a lot of feelings that people have that stem from this. Just the reminder that we're not in control. Like Jeremy said, nothing's different now than it was 2 months ago. We're not in control. God is in charge of the universe. So I think when it's pointed out to us in a way like this, that we're not in control, I think it can lead to a lot of emotions. I want to quickly just share, I've been reading, because of my anxiousness, I've been reading a lot of different thoughts and ideas on how kind of habits you can get into to kind of get through this and to help you. I need a regular reminder that God is still in charge of the universe. And I find that if I don't have that regular reminder, I get wobbly very quickly. So just a couple tips that or habits that I'm trying to get into during this time. One is I try to start every day in quiet time and prayer. If I grab my phone the first thing in the morning, that is a horrible idea. It leads to a very crappy day. It's a bad way to start your day.
Step away from the phone, right?
Don't grab your phone. And if I do that, it just ramps me up. It makes me anxious and concerned, and just setting the tone for the day in quiet time and prayer is a great thing to do. Andy Crouch, he wrote a book called The Tech Wise Family. I listened to a thing this week. He says he needs to look at the sky before one of his rules is he looks at the sky before he looks at his screen every day, which I think is a great practice. So that's number one. Number two, focus on gratitude. Create a gratitude ritual at dinner. We go around and say, what are 3 things you have gratitude for? Gratitude is a great way to combat anxiety. My brain likes to keep lists of things, so I'm either going to be keeping lists of things I'm anxious about or things I'm have gratitude about. So focus on gratitude. 3, get outside. Being outside in God's creation, whether you exercise or walk or do whatever, just to have that time outdoors is a great thing I do every day. Number 4, limit the intake of news, like Jeremy said. And frankly, just be aware of your escapist ways you're escaping. News can be a way to escape. Alcohol can be a way to escape. Netflix can be a way to escape. Just keep an eye on that and limit your intake of that. And the 5th thing is just connection. Look for ways to connect with other people, doing what we're doing here. Whether it's within your family or if you don't have a family, just look for ways to connect. We all have phones. Just focus on connection every day.
Thank you, John. That's very helpful. You got to create a lava flow, right? You need healthy escapes. And I love that about the scriptures. Whenever scripture says do not do something, there's always like 5 or 10 things you can do, and it's like, don't read the news all the time. Don't look at porn all the time. Don't drink, your sorrows away. But do these things that you mentioned. So really appreciate that. And want to move to Eugene. And Eugene, we were talking about this off camera a little earlier.
Yeah.
Just a quote that a friend of mine who's a pastor put on his wall, adapt or die. And it's like, we're in this, there's high stress. It's like, we gotta, our businesses, our organizations, we're changing, and it's changing overnight. This is presently in post-coronavirus, that day when it comes. I mean, things are going to be a lot different, it seems like. And,
Yes.
and in the same way, in our families, though, some things are, being pointed out to us, and, that need to be changed. And maybe God is permitting this to happen so that we'll be more aware. Tell me some of your thoughts that you could share with these that are listening in regards to that.
I think that's very true. Your friend's comment, basically, situations like this force us to really look at and examine our lives, have an introspective look into our lives and what we've been spending our time on, right? And so I think that, like you mentioned, one of my sense is that one of God's purposes in allowing this, permitting this to happen, is that we have allowed a lot of things to go before, take greater priority before God in our lives, right? So a lot of noise and a lot of comfort have basically become idols in our lives. And so God, in some sense, has stripped all those things away from us, and so now we're faced with looking at, okay, what do we have left? What does this mean for me? Think about just even things like, we pride ourselves as Americans for being busy all the time, right? You ask someone, what have you been up to? I've been busy. I've been busy. And God is very clear in scripture that he wants us to take a Sabbath, to take a rest, to go from our Sabbath into the week. But so often we fill those Sabbaths with other activity, and they're good activities a lot of times, but nonetheless it's activity or work or other things. And in some sense, he's forced us to take a rest now. So we got to really look at this. Is there value in what's happening right now? How does this change how I live my life going forward, right? I think of stock portfolios or whatever. There's a certain asset allocation that we have in our portfolios, and we invest a little, money into different assets, right? And so when we look at this time in our family now, how should we rebalance our asset allocation so that we do the things that are most important to God and most honoring to God and most honoring to our families and to our kids and to our marriages and the things that are the most important, as opposed to some of the other things that are fun, but can be a distraction, frankly, right? And so I think that going forward, this is what we got to look at. I mean, I got to tell you, this has been some of the sweetest time for our family to be together. And my wife and I were just saying the other night that this is how we envisioned our family looking like. But the reality is, pre-coronavirus, there was so much distraction with kids' activities, our own activities, sporting events, all sorts of things that kept us from having what we're having right now. So I know it's not going to be the same once this is all over, but are there things we can take forward with us to maintain and preserve some of this precious time that we've had of connecting and building in our relationships with one another and growing in that way?
Thank you so much. You were saying earlier that, businesses get more efficient, when the economy goes down, applying that to the family. I mean, it's like, wow, now we see what preciousness we have. I think John was saying a little earlier that, like talking about, we have a lot of people say of Americans, we have a lot of money and no time. And now we've got
lots of time.
Lots of time. And so, wow, what an investment into our families.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one doable thing, one step that someone could take if they're shell shocked. They're not used to being at home with the kids and the family. They're not used to the stresses that they're having, and they do want to lead well. So each of you, if you could just give one simple step that they could take to lead well.
I mean, I could just, to restate what I said earlier, maybe think back the last couple days, maybe add up roughly how much time you either read the news or were on social media or just kind of consuming things about coronavirus. And then how much time you spent, praying or reading the Bible, or a good one that's just sort of consuming, that's easy. You can do it while you're walking around outside, like John said, would be listening to, sermons. And just set a goal for next week that, whatever it was, just try to tip it a little bit towards putting your, inputting more of, godly wisdom and spending more time communing with God in prayer a little bit more next week and less media.
I would just say this, that for me personally, what God is really showing me is that I need to just stop and be still and listen to him. Right. So even in the midst of this coronavirus and quarantine, I'm coming up with plans for my office and practice. I'm coming up with plans for our church, and plans with what I'm doing. And I really feeling a sense that God's saying, okay, start every day, just listen to what I have to share with you and quiet yourself before me. And so I'm trying to make that into a habit. And I think he's forcing it down me more than anything. So I'm going to keep working on that.
Hey, I just want to end up with a scripture. Thank you so much, Eugene, for that. This is from Jeremiah the prophet, who lived in a very difficult time. I mean, it was immensely difficult. And, these are the words from Jeremiah 17, verses 7 and 8. It says, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in his name. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends its roots down by the stream." I'm going to end there with that passage. It goes on, but I just want you to think about this. If you follow through and you lead yourself to trust him and to have confidence in his name, you will be like a tree in your family. You will be like that tree, and you will be watered by God in those streams that are way down as your roots go down, and that will be so helpful to you and to your family.